welcome back to Books with Brandywine. Today is my Sailormoonathon wrap-up video. So for this month, I read 8.5 books, I believe. One of them was an ebook, and the rest of them were, like, I want to say solid books, but, like, actual books. So the first book that we read was the teen book, and that was Beds Are for Flowers by R.K.Gold. And I had no idea what to expect going into this book. I knew absolutely nothing about it, except that people kept posting that they loved it and that it surprised them. It was different from what they expected, and that was all I knew about it. Like, I knew nothing else going into it. It's, like I said, it's very, very short. It's about 100-something pages. So I loved it. It's hard to describe. I don't think it'll give away spoilers. So the world that the story takes place in is all gray. There is no color in the world. And when the people die in this world, or they're getting ready to die, a Reaper will come and will escort them to the next world where they're supposed to be going to. And that world, like, back in the day, when they used to do this, their world was beautiful and colorful, and the world that they went to was beautiful and colorful, and people weren't afraid to die. Everybody was happy. But a Reaper went rogue and blocked the pathway between their world and this world that they're supposed to be going to. And ever since then, color has stopped coming into the world. Their world has become gray. And now when a Reaper comes and takes them to go to the end world, they have to take a long way around. And that long route takes them past another place that I'm forgetting the name of. But it's, like, really dark. It's where all the monsters come from, basically, and it's just this really scary place, and not everybody makes it to the city. So now it's become this really, like, dark, just sad place, and, like, you can feel the dark. Like, I have never realized how suffocating it is not to have color in the world. I mean, even just, like, look at my bookshelves. Like, there's so much color. And so reading about this world where there is no color was just incredibly suffocating for me. But luckily it was only like 100-something pages, so I was able to get through it really fast. So the story picks up, like, at that point. The main character's dad is dying. He's been sick for like 6 months, and a Reaper keeps coming to try and collect him to take him on this journey while he's still strong enough to make the journey. And his family has been bartering for time to try and keep him. And so the book follows this boy and his sister and his best friend's journey to try and save not only his father, but everybody else there, and has to end up taking on this Reaper. And so I really, really liked it. I thought it was one of those books where you can definitely, like, learn a lot from it. And so I'm really glad I read it. There is a second book. I don't know yet if I'm going to be picking up the second book, but I am really, really glad that I read that first book. Like I said, it was very suffocating for me, and so if you, like, have that issue, like, it might be suffocating for you too, but I would definitely suggest going and giving it a look. I think I found it on Amazon when I read it, and I just read it on the Kindle app on my phone. The next book that we read was Warcross, and this was our teen book for Sailor Mercury for the Sailormoonathon. I loved this book in a completely different way than I loved Beds for Flowers. This book was awesome. I could not put it down. When I did put it down to go to work, I kept thinking about it. I couldn't wait to come home and read it. I was reading this book all the time. I think it took me just a few days to finish. Mostly because, you know, I still had responsibilities. Otherwise, I would have finished this in, like, one night because this book was so awesome. I just could not put it down. So this book follows a hacker named Tamika Chen, and she is also a bounty hunter, and she gets hired by the creator of the Warcross games to track down another hacker who has been threatening the games. And in order to track him down, she is inserted into the games themselves. And so this book was just so cool. It had some of my favorite things in it. Virtual reality gaming, which I love, and huge gaming tournaments, which I love, and a little bit of YA romance thrown into there. Although she's 18, and I think he's like 21 or 22 or something. So their romance does get a little bit adult, but not in that, like, they don't have sex or anything, but there was definitely a scene in the hot springs, and I was like, wait a second. I was like doing the math in my head, because they didn't really like say that certain things happened, but certain things happened. And so, like, not like they didn't have sex or anything, but just like, anyway, you'll understand when you get to it. And so but the book, like, is so good. I loved the way she built this world. I loved the descriptions of it, both the world that they were living in and the games. They actually spent, less time in the games than I expected. They were probably in the world, like, let's see, what's a good number comparison? I don't want to say like 2/3 and 1/3, but yeah, I guess it would be like that. Like 2/3 of the time they're in the real world, 1/3 of the time they're in the virtual reality world. So those are kind of like I really, really enjoyed it. I loved seeing the different personalities. There's one girl in here that is really, really good at chess, and she can like see your moves like 12 moves ahead. And that got me really excited, because if anyone has ever sat through a movie with me, anytime a chessboard pops up, I'm like, chess! Like, I just shout it out. I love chess. I'm obsessed with chess. You saw I had random chess pieces on my bookshelf that I had found in my yard. My son earlier today was playing with some wooden chess pieces that some friends have made me over the years and given to me for holidays. Because I'm just obsessed with chess. In fact, one of the things I had to get rid of when I moved were my huge, like, chess pieces that I had bought. They were like, I had like one of each of the different pieces, and they were just like huge. And I really missed those. I like felt bad that I had to get rid of them, but like I had to make some serious cuts to fit everything. Anyway, so I am obsessed with chess. I love, 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 love chess. And so it got me really excited that chess was mentioned in the book, because I'm obsessed with chess. I would definitely recommend reading this book. I had so much fun. I cannot wait to read the second one, Wildcard. I don't know if there's going to be a third one or not, but there's definitely a second one that's out already, and I cannot wait to read it. Like, I am so excited. And there was one character that was kind of like, through the whole book, you're trying to figure out who he is. And like, I figured out who he was. But like, I had him narrowed down to one of two people, and he was one of those people. So I felt kind of proud. But at the same time, I was like, okay, that's the one complaint I had. And I might do like a further review of this book that is a spoiler review, because there's certain things I just want to get off my chest, and I can't say them in a in a spoiler-free video, because they are definitely spoilers. But I love that book, and I would recommend anyone pick it up. The next book, which was actually the first book that I read in the readathon, was Eragon. And I was reading this because Christopher Paolini was in town, and I wanted to try and read the series before he got here. I only managed to finish Eragon and The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm before he got here. I'm going to be finishing the rest of the series this next month. Oh, I forgot to say. So, no, I didn't forget to say. Okay, these are the first books that are actually prompts. So, for Eragon, I used it for 4 prompts. I used it for Sailor Mars, which was to have fire in any capacity. I used it for, I believe it was Sailor Jupiter? Yeah, Sailor Jupiter, which was to read a book that was over 400 pages. I did it for Sailor Moon, I believe that was. Yep, which was to reread a favorite book. And I used it for Sailor Venus, which was to read a book about a character with superpowers, or like some sort of special powers. And so obviously there's fire in it. They use the spell Brissinger a lot, which is the word for fire in the original language. I forget what they call the language in this book. And I really enjoyed getting to reread this book. When I finish reading the series, I'm going to do a full series spotlight for the series. But I did really, really enjoy reading this book. It totally held up. I'm so glad that I read it. And then I read the short stories, which is The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm. I used this for my Sailor Chibi Moon prompt, which was to read a novella. And this is the reason that Christopher Paolini was on book tour, was because he just released this book in December, and he's going around and talking about it. I really, really enjoyed it. This book does take place after the series ended. And so if you haven't read the series, I would not suggest reading this book yet, because there would be spoilers. So definitely finish reading the series before you read this book. It is totally worth it to read the series. Like, it's just an awesome series. And this book was really awesome. I really had fun with it. It follows 3 stories. I don't think there were more than 3 stories in here. It does say it's volume 1. He does plan on writing more. So they follow, the Fork follows Murtag's story. The Witch follows Angela's story. And the Worm is actually completely new characters that we hadn't met before that are Urgles. And the Worm is the cover of it, which is actually art that Christopher Paolini did. So I really, really enjoyed this. Again, I will talk more about it during that series spotlight, but that is another one that I would really suggest reading, but definitely read the series first. And then the next book that I finished was The Kitchen Princess, and I used this for 2 prompts. Let me see which ones I did it for. I used this for Tuxedo Mask, which was a romance novel. And I used it for Sailor Neptune, a contemporary novel. And so this does take place in modern times. And it is a manga. So it's got all the pictures. And I mentioned this in my TBR. This is one of my all-time favorite mangas. I absolutely love this series. I remember so much from, like, the beginning of the series that there were things in this book that I did not remember, like, at all. I forgot that when she gets to her new school, she is bullied by most of the other students that are in her class because they don't feel that she's worthy of being in their class, because they are in the special talent class, where you have to have some sort of special talent, whether it's piano or violin, or one girl is a model, a professional model, and she's in the class. And I forgot that girl's entire story arc. So that girl, in addition to being a bully, and I guess she would normally be a bully, but she specifically targets this girl because she thinks this girl's trying to steal her boyfriend, who is the dark-haired boy, who's not really her boyfriend, but the 2 brothers and her grew up together, and she's just majorly crushing on him, and she thinks that this girl's trying to steal him from her, when she's really not. She's just friendly with everyone. So she's bullying her because of that and trying to get her kicked out of the school. And at the same time, because she is a model, she does develop an eating disorder. So if that is a trigger warning for you, then I would definitely suggest being careful. She does overcome the eating disorder, but it is in there. And I don't know how sensitive people might be to that. So definitely be warned of that. There is bullying, and it is sad, and I did cry because I cry all the time. But it wasn't anything I couldn't handle. And I will describe it again in more detail in my Asian TBR. Since there's only 2 books to talk about in my Asian TBR, it makes so much sense for me to describe it more in depth in there. So for Song for a Well, I loved this book. And I loved it so much that it's going to get its own entire, like, video review, because I can talk about this book for like 5 or 10 minutes, and I don't want this readathon wrap-up to be like half an hour. But just know that I loved this book. I learned a lot from this book. The plot was basically what I thought it was. She hears about Blue 55, and she decides that she wants to go and meet him and make a song for him so that he knows that somebody out there hears him. And this book is so good. I loved learning about sign language in this book because the main character is deaf. I loved learning about the blue whale. I loved learning about things I didn't know, like dolphins riding blue whales. This book was so much fun. It was a little bit heartbreaking because the little girl is so frustrated, and it is so hard for her to get people to understand her. But I loved it. Go check out the book review. I'll probably be releasing that next week, so that you guys can know more about this book, because this book is awesome. The next book that I read was Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. Oh, I keep calling it Tiger Mom, but it's Tiger Mother. And this book wasn't actually for this readathon, it's for the Asian readathon, but they allowed us to count normal pages for any of the books we read that weren't. So, like, all the books that were prompts, we got to double the pages. But any books we read that weren't for prompts, we just got to single count them, so I still count it. I moved all of my pile. I know there's a book I'm missing. Oh, yeah. And then I also tried to read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stane. I did not finish this book. I got maybe, I don't know how many pages into it. I got to the point where Harry Potter has boarded the train and they just got all of the candy and they're eating all of the candy. So that's the part that I got to. I had already, like, it's been so long since I read the books, and I guess the movies are, like, really, really strong in my head, so there were a lot of scenes in the book that I was like, oh, that happened then. Oh, that's different from the movie. So that was really good. It really made me want to go back and read the series again. Like, I really, really want to go back and read the series. This was very challenging for me. I was reading it for the Sailor Mercury prompt, which was to read a challenging book, and this book was super, super challenging. And the reason for that is, we'll just pick a random page. If you can see that writing, there. That is Scottish, because it is the Scottish edition. And so, as I was going along, I was learning more and more words, which was making it much easier to read. But I noticed that my biggest problem with trying to read this book was I was reading it one word at a time, which is not how you're supposed to read books. You know, usually when you read a book, like, you kind of, I don't know how to describe it, you know, you get into that groove and you're just, like, reading the whole sentence, and it's like you're not reading the individual words, it's just, like, playing in your mind kind of a thing. But when I was reading this, I was reading it each individual word, and it slowed me down from reading 100 pages a day to reading 20 pages a day. And so after a week, I had a really, really bad headache, and I decided to put it aside temporarily while I read Song for a Whale, but then I loved Song for a Whale and couldn't stop, and then I went on to the next book and the next book. And so now that I have finished I did forget one book. Now that I have finished all of the books that I'm reading for the Sailormoonathon and the Asian Readathon, I'm going to go back and try and read this again. And I'm going to read it until I get another headache, and then I'm going to switch over to the Inheritance Cycle and finish reading those. I am determined to finish this book. I don't know how long it's going to take me. I'm going to just keep reading it in between my other books, but I'm determined to finish this book because I really, really did enjoy it. I loved getting to read it in like a Scottish accent in my head, and I loved getting to learn all of these new words. Like, I finally learned what Hager means, because I think that's the right word, Hager. It's been like a few months since Hager, since I've read this. It's been like a month or a couple weeks since I read this. But, like, that word is in the song 500 Miles, and I never knew what that word meant, and now I know what that word means. It means talking nonsense, pretty much. So there's a lot of words that I've learned in this, and I like how they change things. Like Dumbledore, I think, is Dumbledore, and they changed like Crabbe and Goyle's names, and just like certain random things. They changed George's names, so I loved that. I loved getting to read the different words, but it is definitely a challenge for me. And then the last book, which I actually just read today, was The Giver. And I read this for Sailor Pluto's Read a Dystopian. And I have been wanting to read this book since I was really little. Both my parents read it when I was in elementary school. And there's always been a debate in my family, because my mom said that the boy lives at the end. And my dad said that the boy died at the end. And so for the last, like, 20 years, I've had that thought in my head. And I've always wanted to read it so I could find out, does the boy die at the end? I just finished reading the book. I have no idea if the boy died at the end or not. I shouldn't laugh. It's not funny. What's funny is that I thought for sure I would have an answer when I finally read this book myself, and I don't. But it is a quartet, so now I have to go read the other 3 books in the series and see if maybe there's more of an answer in those other 3 books. And I also need to go watch the movie that was just made for this book. This book, okay, so you know how I talked about how I read Beds Are for Flowers at the beginning of the month, and they're in a world that has no color? Same deal with The Giver. They are in a world that has no color. It has no music. Everything is the same. They are in the sameness. And it is a community of people. There are multiple communities, but the main boy that lives in the community he's just about to turn 12. And when they turn 12, they get their assignments that they're going to have for the rest of their lives. and he becomes assigned to be the receiver. And that was pretty much all that I knew about it, was that this boy was charged with getting all of the memories from this other guy in the community, and that nobody else had the memories. And that's all I knew about it. And this book is... It challenged a lot of my thoughts. It's definitely one of those books, like, I feel like on my bookshelf I'm going to put it right next to the Phantom Toll Booth, because it's one of those books that I think is important for kids and adults to read, because it sends one of those messages that, hey, this is kind of what we're heading towards and we need to do something about it. In this world, they have created what would seem like a utopia, and it seems like it's this great, like, perfect world where everything is organized and everything is peaceful and everyone is happy, but no one has any real feelings. They just think they do, but they don't. And everything is super controlled. Like, I'll be going along and thinking, okay, this world doesn't seem so bad. I mean, everything's organized, everyone's happy, and then you find out that they have, like, these little whipping stick things that they whip the 3-year-old's legs with when the 3-year-olds say the wrong word. Like, this one boy kept saying smack instead of snack, and every time he made the mistake, if you make any mistake, especially with words, they would whip his legs. And it got so bad that this little 3-year-old had welts on his legs. And stuff like that kept happening. Like, I'd be going along thinking, okay, like, the community's not that bad. And then something like that would happen and just blow it out of the water. I'm like, okay, this community is really, really bad. And so, but at the same time, I really, really loved this book. And, like, I still need to do more thinking on it, because the main character is the receiver, but the book is called The Giver. And the giver is the man that he's apprenticed to, that's giving him these memories of how life was before they chose to be in this community. And they don't say how long this community has been going on, but it sounds like it's been going on for generations and generations and generations. At least 3 generations, maybe more, but for sure at least 3. And, I don't really know how to describe this book without giving away a ton. I mean, the lettering, like, the writing is really huge. I read it in one day, so not too much happens, but I feel like what does happen has a huge impact. And so this is definitely one of those books that I would suggest every middle schooler read, even elementary schoolers. I think you could read it as early as elementary school students. And I would definitely suggest, like, adults, if they haven't read it yet, or even if they have read it, reread it. I think this is an important book. It is sad. It is in a dystopia that is disguised as a utopia, I guess. But I think it's really important. I think it has very important lessons, and I think everyone should read it. There is one warning. A baby... Okay, I have to say it, even though it's a spoiler. A baby does die in this book. And so definitely be prepared for that. But yeah. And it's not the baby you think that is going to die that I'm talking about. I don't even know if that baby dies. But a baby does die in this book. So just be prepared for that. I know for me, that is like my biggest trigger warning. Probably one of my few trigger warnings. I hate when anything happens to children. And so even knowing that it was happening, that it was going to happen, like, I still wasn't quite mentally prepared for it, because it didn't happen how I thought it was going to happen. They definitely have a thing going on in this world where it's very much like, you know how, like, when you're little and your dog dies and your parents tell you that the dog is going off to this really happy farm where he's just going to run and play for the rest of his old age, and he's just going to be so happy with all the other doggies? No? Your parents didn't tell you that lie? My parents told me that lie. But a very similar thing is happening in this book with people that are released. And so, like, having had my parents tell me that lie, like, when they started talking about the release, it was like, it's totally the same thing. Like, that's totally what's happening. So, like, you totally see it coming, but at the same time, it didn't happen the way I was expecting. So, those were all of the books. I did do all of the prompts. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 prompts. So, there were 11 prompts. And I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books, plus another book that wasn't part of this readathon, so that's 8 books and a half, because I read half of Harry Potter. And so actually, the one prompt for Harry Potter to read a challenging book, I did not finish that prompt, which is frustrating, because I don't think I'm going to be able to finish that book in the next 3 days before the month ends, even though, like, the Sailormoonathon originally was going from the 1st to the 20th, but they extended it to go to the end of the month because a lot of people were asking for it. And I didn't actually see any official announcements on that. They just talked about it, like, in our team group chat, that it had been officially changed. And so I didn't finish that one prompt. I mean, still going to try. I'm going to continue reading that book for the rest of the month before I switch over to Brissinger. But, or whatever the next book is in the inheritance cycle. I think it might be Eldest. So that was the one challenge I didn't finish. But other than that, I think I did really, really good. I'm probably not going to do, I was just going to say, I'm not going to do another readathon for like a while because I'm so exhausted. But there's a really cool readathon coming up next month. So I'm totally going to do that readathon. So I guess this isn't the end of my readathons for a while. But I will see you guys on Friday with my wrap-up for my Asian readathon. Toodles!